I just had to do that for Kim because she loves it so much. All right. Welcome back to the VIBE Edu podcast. We are coming together for a new series. Hopefully you enjoyed our last one with the mailbag. Thank you for everyone that submitted questions for that episode. But for this series, we're going to do executive functioning, which I know someone on screen is extremely happy to talk about. So I'm going to throw it to him as we're introducing this topic. Mitch, where would you like to take us as far as maybe someone that's just learning about executive functioning?
I think it's a great topic and super applicable for all listeners, all grade levels, and including leadership, school and district. But yeah, I think the best starting place is just the basics. What are these things, and how do they impact teaching and learning? So, I'm cool with starting there.
Yeah, let's do it.
You want me to start us off?
Well, I do, but real quick, I want to
Yeah.
say congratulations because you have a second book that just launched.
Just published yesterday. Actually, good news. It was supposed to be in April, and Corwin was able to fast track it by a month, unbeknownst to us. And as of St. Patty's Day, it's available not for pre-order, but in the real world. And if you're looking at Amazon, which I hope you do, Corwin, or buy it from Organized Binder so I can sign it. Put a little note in there for you. That's always fun, right, everybody? When you get to sign it and send it. But yeah, available everywhere, and super proud of this one. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Get you with a.
I had to throw the applause in there.
I love
Congrats,
it.
buddy.
I love it. And I will say this: I'm really proud of this book and the pre-reads, including all of you, but a whole lot of other folks. The feedback has just been really overwhelming, and it's not, although it's focused on K3, that's in the title, but it's for every grade level and beyond. It's been really, and the parent feedback has been really interesting. Like, I need this, I want this. So I think it's a book. A part of me is like, I'm glad it says K3 because it's specific for those grade bands, but it's really applicable for everybody. So kind of wish we didn't have K3 in there, but I'm glad we do. So
I think, like, before you start, Mitch, I just want to put myself back in the classroom. And I think when I looked at students around me in first grade, so that fits your K3 band perfectly, every single kid that I went like, whoa, like, how do I help you? What's happening here? I don't even know where to start with you. When I look back, it was executive functioning every single time. And when I had conversations with parents, with conferences, or just a, hey, we need to meet sort of a conversation, I wish that I had the knowledge I have now about executive functioning, because that's the stuff that they need. It is the social emotional learning, and it is the executive functioning piece that I feel like those skills are lagging in our kids. And that's the stuff that adults struggle with how to teach. So I'm excited for you to start, because I think as a teacher, if you're listening, you're going to go, oh, that's what's missing here, or, oh, that's what's going to really support this kid. And then I'm hoping that we also get to the actual strategies and things that you can do seamlessly in your classroom, so that you're doing it all the time.
Yeah. My proposal for the next 4 episodes would include all of that. Like, let's talk generally today about executive functions, tease out the difference in some ways between executive functions and executive functioning skills. Like, kind of, there's something to be said there to clarify. But when we talk, hopefully, if you all agree, core executive functions, which would be this next book coming out in our next episode, we can get really practical. 3rd episode, higher order, which would be like grades 3 and above. And then looking at executive functions, not as academic, because they're not academic in nature. They're what we all use every day as semi-functional adults and professionals, and right. So what's the impact on CTE and college and career readiness and pathways? I think would be a great way to round out the 4, if you all agree. But yeah, super practical. That's what I'm really passionate about, is translating the work. And what I like to say working with teachers is, as a starting point, executive functions are cognitive processes. They're not skills per se. They're not taught in that sense. For example, like, we know in the brain where the processing happens, and it's really interesting, right? What's going on with these cognitive processes, but that's all great and interesting and everything. But if I'm a practitioner, to your point, Kim, like, what's that mean for me tomorrow in my classroom? That's the important part of the work. And so when we look at that, we're kind of really trying to spot the behaviors that manifest or come about from the development of and the support of the development of executive functions, which I think is endlessly fascinating as well. But it's one of those things in life as an educator that once you see it, you can't unsee it, and you will walk into your space forever and see it just differently. Yeah. Both the physical environment, the acoustic environment, the kids in the room, the behaviors, all of it. You're going, oh, like you said, Kim, like, I wish I would have known this, because now I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, that's executive dysfunction. It's not the fault of the kid. It's then how do we get curious to and intentional to start to shape those environments in ways that lead to better executive functioning. So that's I'll kick that. I'll just throw all that out there. And I wish, by the way, and then I'm kind of pulling a TJ here. I said I was done, and now I have one more thing I want to say. For the life of me, I don't understand why this work's not embedded into every teacher prep program that exists, because everybody says that, like, oh, I wish I would have known this. And so often, like, Kim, I'm just going to make the assumption, but I know it's true because I know you figured it out over the years. And one of the things with my co-author, Sarah Oberly, with this book is, so we say it right in the intro, like, our aim is to take that guessing game out. Like, why wait? Why go through trying to look at the attrition rates? The job's hard enough. Like, how about we just support you with that directly? And that's the aim of this second book. So what do you all think? I mean, I keep talking, so I'm gonna check myself here.
Well, I think we should give some examples. The one thing I was thinking about is, so much language being used around durable skills, transferable skills, social and emotional learning, executive functions, soft skills, they used to be called. In a lot of ways, I think people can get confused about what this stuff is. So we should probably do some defining. But early in my career, I came out of management, out of the restaurant industry, managing restaurants, into being an English teacher in a CTE only high school. And because of the programming and because of the population, I was teaching a lot of executive functionings in my English classroom, but I didn't have the language to tell you that that's what I was doing, and using the vernacular and naming the skills. And you always talk about organized binder, and I just remember having these like really tight organization systems to keep the kids on track, vocational students who are in their career pathways for 180 minutes and then come into my English classroom for 90 minutes and doing a lot more reading and writing. We had to make that hands-on for them, but we also had to keep it super organized. And so there were skills that they were learning embedded in that. But again, I had to do it naturally because of what was happening and because of my experience using employability skills in my previous role and understanding what these vocational students were going to need to be college and career ready, which I'm glad we're going to do a whole episode on that. But if we could start, Mitch, with some definitions, some terms, I think people would get a little bit more understanding of what we're talking about when we say executive functions.
Yeah. I think that's wise. So back to what I was saying, that they are these cognitive processes, and that's great. But as practitioners, we're looking for what manifests from those executive functions and the development of them. And we know from the research that it is developmental. The reason this second book is looking at what's called core executive functions is developmentally, like the biology of a human being and the brain is developing in ways in K1, 2, those 4, 5, 6, 7 years of age, in a way that's very different, of course, from a 14-year-old or even 12 or et cetera. And we know that this development, this process carries on into our mid-20s. And of course, there's variability in that process for all individuals. And again, I'll keep saying it, like, that is interesting. And but okay, what's that mean for me now? First thing is to understand, and this will be episodes 2 and 3, the difference between core and higher order executive functioning, and not having an expectation that a 6-year-old has that capacity or ability when the biology isn't developed there yet. So having really age and grade level appropriate executive functioning work is important, which both books I think offer. But I actually try to answer your question about definitions, TJ. I steer away from it because I always have that practitioner lens in my work, and I use one word. I stole it from a school that we work with Organized Binder. And by the way, if you don't know Organized Binder, it's a program I designed that supports the development of executive functions. It's not a curriculum. It's not something else for a teacher to do. It's just a way to support that development. So if you hear that thrown around, that's what it is. But the word that this school, they reached out and to my team and I at Organized Binder and said, we're on a mission to develop a sense of studentness in our students. And when I heard that, I was like, I like that. If you think of, like, if everyone here and then anyone tuning in, like, pause for a moment, and what do you think of when you think of a student at whatever grade level, whoever you serve, that's developing this sense of studentness? What's that look like? How does that manifest? And it's a fun conversation. I'll just throw it out to you. What do you see? What do you envision? Give me just a couple phrases.
I see a student who is able to manage themselves, to sit calmly, to listen, to attend to a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
A student who is able to do what is told, right, or asked them to do, for them to be able to, whether that be come down to the carpet, whether that be complete this worksheet, and to also be flexible in their thinking when a plan needs to shift.
Mm-hmm. What about you guys? What do you see?
I don't want to always focus on compliance, though, either. I see an inquisitive person, someone who can ask good questions, someone who can hold two opposing thoughts in their mind about something without subscribing to one or the other. I see someone, I love that Kim said flexibility, flexible thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I see someone that thinks beyond the problem that they're faced with in any given classroom. And that studentness, I think that the right environments, and we've talked about it at length on this show, the environment and the environmental factors create that for a kid who take calculated risks and share their thinking about something and formulating thoughts. That's what I see when I think about studentness. My learnerness, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. About you, Josh?
Well, as a producer of the show, I was looking for your website, so I wasn't really paying attention to the question. So will you please repeat it? Because I need some executive functioning skills myself.
Yeah. Well, we know multitasking doesn't work, but thank you for putting up the website, organizedbinder.com. What do you see when you, like, what do you envision when you think of a student developing a sense of studentness? throw out a couple phrases or words.
When you say studentness, what are you referring to? Like, what would you define that as?
Exactly. Anything you want.
Yeah, I haven't said it yet. You don't have to. That's okay if it doesn't jump out. But I was just telling the story of a school that reached out and they were.
No, yeah, I heard that part. I'm just thinking, I think we just assume what studentness is for ourselves, right? I think that's sometimes the problem that we get into. I'm sorry, Mitch. One of the things you were talking through and what TJ was talking about is something I was referring to, or at least remembering with conversation, a mutual friend of ours with Carrie Bonnet. And she was talking about like the communication of teachers and just like, the broader generalization comments that we make, right? Get to work, or
Right.
Calm fill in the blank, right? Yeah, calm down, whatever. And just the assumptions that the student or the studentess, right, has these skills to then take that and break it down to what are the first steps needed in this project, or and there might be something else, right? Sometimes a student is sitting there and they're not doing anything, and we just assume that they're lazy or they're procrastinating or fill in the negative connotation. And sometimes it's more of a, I'm overwhelmed, or there's another emotion that goes into that. And so I guess that's kind of where my brain went when TJ was talking about like his definition of a studentess. Because sometimes we assume that our kids have all these different skills that may not exist. Right. In addition to the fact that as a teacher, I don't communicate sometimes very well because I assume that everyone in the classroom has the same abilities.
Right. Yeah,
which would probably took us in a different rabbit hole than you were trying to go. But that's
there is no all of it's good. But it's interesting how listening to you and TJ, your responses as the majority of your career and time as like teachers in secondary level ish.
Yep.
Kim down in the younger years, and Kim's first thing is I see a student who can self-regulate, right? And when you look at the core executive functions, which will be next episode, which is the second book for grades K through 3, it's working memory, inhibition, and cognitive flexibility, also referred to as shifting. Those are the 3 core EFs. Well, and by the way, there's interplay between both, which is why I think teachers should read both books, and in particular the second book for secondary teachers. But working memory is this it's finite. It has a bandwidth to it. It's the place of learning. It's the active part of our brain. We have short-term memory, we have long-term memory. Short-term memory being passive, temporary. Some refer to working memory as the mental sketch pad, like what you're thinking right now. If you're thinking and listening to what I'm saying, and right, but it has a capacity to it. So, for example, what Kim was saying, and what you're saying there is demonstrate goal-oriented behavior. Can I finish this task? Can I finish what I've asked of me? Can I not punch the person next to me, or can I, whatever it might be. When we look at the second core EF, inhibition, right? Can I inhibit so that I can stay focused? And there's both external stimuli, which is what you're talking about, TJ, with environment. But there's also internal. I want to go to recess. I'm hungry, right? I don't like that person next to me. All these things I have to, can I quell that to stay focused? Can I, quote unquote, self-regulate? Well, the ability to do that in large part is determined in some ways by the capacity in my working memory. So if my working memory is taxed out, I have less capacity, or put it this way, if I'm using a lot of my mental bandwidth to try to stay focused because maybe the classroom's really noisy, or there's a bunch of visual stimuli, or the furniture there's some ambiguity in the classroom, and I'm trying to navigate and figure all of that is working memory capital. And the intentionality was I love about this second book is saying, okay, like just enter those spaces, because the internal stuff you may not be able to influence. Although my co-author tells a great story about how she accidentally brought out the donuts or cake for a little party they were having. So she got everybody started on this activity, right? And then was prepping for the next thing. Well, guess what happened when she brought the donuts out with first graders, right? Where ninth graders with me, I can be like, check out all these donuts. You'll have them when you're done. She's like, that would never happen for me. They're just so now they're having to use some capacity. Oh, I got to stay focused on this thing. They're all interrelated. And yet, TJ and Josh, you were talking much more about like critical thinking and reasoning and viewing other people's perspectives and opinions, even though like that's all the third episode we'll talk about, like higher order executive functioning. But they do all manifest in a way into these kind of skills. Like being able to self-regulate is a skill. Can I do that? Can I inhibit, stay focused? Now, where we get creative as educators is that executive dysfunction is not, and this is really important to understand when we jump into the deep end on executive functions as students, for students, is that we have to be careful not to have a deficit lens, because you can look at a student and be like, you've made the assumption that you should be able to do this thing and you can't. And it's like, well, then it's this deficit. There's something wrong. And what we know from the research is executive dysfunction is about the student and their environment, not the student alone. And that's why I said earlier about getting curious. Like, why is this kid? I've talked to, and Kim probably has a bazillion stories where we were all down at the carpet and we've all got up and moved. And like I've asked and said, okay, here's what we're doing next. Does everybody know? It's a routine, so I don't even have to talk about it anymore. And then I've confirmed with every student, and then we get up to do the next thing, and there's one kid just staring out the window or just staring, like they just confirmed that they knew what to do. And instead of saying like, what's wrong with that kid, it's let's get curious, because we've talked about this on the show I'm sure at times, and this is why executive function work needs to be tier 1. It's got to be for all kids, because maybe the kid's just tired. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe things going on at home. Maybe there's these things that we can't control, but maybe there's something there that needs further intervention or support in more of a tier 2 or even tier 3. But if I don't have all students getting practice with or in environments that lead to better executive functioning, you've said this, TJ, since I've known you can't tier 2 yourself out of a tier 1 problem. And this sense of studentness, this, what I see is agency. I see some dexterity. I know how to do school, right? The stuff of doing school, the stuff of learning is found in executive functions. And it's a very lonely experience to sit in a classroom and feel like you don't know how to do school, because there's a bunch of kids around you that do. That was my experience. Like, how come they all seem to know how to do this? And I'm like, I'm here. I want to do well. I just don't know. Like, I don't feel like I know how to jump in and dive in with that dexterity. And that's where executive functioning comes in.
I think there's a lot of kids like that. And I think that's where we lose kids, especially early on. Everybody has always said the middle school is the place where we lose kids. I don't agree. I think the middle school is typically where it manifests, but we've lost them long before then. And that's also why I go to the thinking and the holding the thoughts in your mind and inhibiting somebody else's idea from skewing yours too far, and that mental flexibility, but also letting in new content to mix with stuff we already think about. And so, and having influence from others and knowing when to accept that influence in the classroom. That thinking mind for me is always important, because number one, I think we're losing it in the age of social media, and your feed is feeding you what you want it to, and confirmation bias is a real thing. I think we're losing it out there in terms of being able to hold multiple perspectives. And I know that that's all part of what goes on in somebody who is self-regulated. And I don't want the conversation to be about compliance either. Doing school well doesn't just mean that you're doing all things the teacher says so just because that's the authority figure in the room. It's also all of these other things. Because I can see a teacher listening who's like, oh yeah, if I had all my kids have executive functioning, they'd all just do what I would tell them to do and the classroom would be organized. That's not, I don't think, a complete picture of what we're talking about here.
Let me give an example. And I've been like hanging on to it and perfecting it in my brain as you've been talking. I think if we get away from school for a hot second, teachers who are listening are going to go, oh, wait, that's me. Because I want you as the adult to also go, huh, you mean I need to exercise these skills too? And the answer is yes. And I think the perfect
Mhm.
example is making coffee in the morning. And when I'm talking to teachers, and Josh is a fan of that, when I'm talking to teachers, I will give them this example and say, how many of you make coffee in the morning? And they're like, me. Well, great. Well, what happens if you wake up in the morning and your plan, your goal is to go make coffee and you know exactly where to go into your cupboard in the kitchen, you open it up, and then all of a sudden you don't have coffee beans. Well, now I need to manage my emotions because I'm pissed that my husband forgot to get the coffee beans and now I don't have coffee and I'm upset about it, right? So I'm not going to scream at my husband because I have a lovely relationship with him and I'm not going to go off the handle. But then guess what? Then my kid starts coming down the stairs and says, Mom, hey, I need clean clothes for gym. And you're like, well, you didn't tell me. And now you're all upset about that. And then the dog starts puking and you're like, oh my God, what's going on in here? The goal was just to make coffee. And your plan has now shifted a million different directions and you're hanging on to all the information. The dog, what's going on with the dog? I got to take the dog to the vet. Did he eat? Did he drink? When was the last time he had his medication? Then I'm also thinking, again, I think of like a post-it note, like, right? Like your working memory is a post-it note in your brain. You're thinking about the dog. Now you're also thinking about, did he ask me? Did my kid ask me to clean his gym clothes? Like, was that even a thing? Did I forget? Did he forget? I'm going to get upset about that. Now back to the coffee beans. Think about all of that, you guys. That's real life. And so you are trying to manage all of that when really the goal of everything in the morning was just to make coffee. Now, all of those examples, I also use the example of like just getting to school and then maybe there's like something in the middle of the road and you have got to find another way to go around. It's shifting that plan. It's managing yourself. And so when you said like that sense of studentness, yes, classroom setting, but this stuff is happening all day. This is life, right, with all of us, not just for students, for you as the adult too.
Yeah. Hey, Mitch, I want you to talk about the calorie piece too. And I can't remember if we've talked about it on this show, but me and you've had conversations about like the metaphor of calories. And just to give an example, that is like if our listeners have been driving before and it's a route that you've gone thousands of times, hundreds of times, maybe it's just like going to work. I can think of a time where many times I'm driving to work and I'm getting into the thought process and then I'm there. I'm like, holy crap, I don't really remember driving the route, but like because I've done it so many times, it's just ingrained. I don't have to think about it. And I'm still like processing other things during the drive or in the shower, right? You take a shower and you're like, I think I cleaned everything. I hope I did, but like it just is something that you've ingrained in over and over and over and over, and you start to think and process other things, and then you realize that task is done, and you're like an autopilot. But then there's other things that we do that take up a lot of those calories, and then we feel like Kim's talking about, where we get into this like nervous system heightened state. But I would love for you to just kind of talk through what that looks like for our brain and how that metaphor works out.
Yeah, what you're all referring to is automaticity. And that's the goal when it comes to executive functioning, because if I'm having to focus, right, like, I'll keep it in the classroom though. And I mentioned this earlier to Kim's point, like this isn't an academic thing. We're just talking that way because we're educators, right? We're talking about teaching and learning, setting up kids for success. But there's a capacity, there's a bandwidth. And one of the analogies I use in my first book is calories. If you're going to go run a mile, it takes a certain number of calories. If you put a 20-pound weighted vest on and run the same thing, more calories, and you only have so many, right? And so when we think about that bandwidth or that capacity in working memory, as sacred because it's the engine for learning, the more we can bring about automaticity, which is, to Kim's point with coffee, it's automatic. I get up, I don't want to talk to anybody, I want to make some coffee, right? But in order for that to be automatic, it was automatic. She wasn't thinking about it, and she got there and the materials weren't there. Same thing in the classroom. I've got my routines down. Kim's talked about that. That's all I talk about in both books and Organized Mind. The whole point is establishing a predictable routine, right? And let's say the routine for XYZ, whatever we're doing, requires these materials and these things. Well, I show up there like making coffee and I don't have my materials. Things break down. The automaticity is there. So the intentionality around executive functioning is decreasing interference and increasing automaticity. And the less of my kind of mental bandwidth that I'm using for anything other than learning, we refer to this as extraneous cognitive load, then there's less available to apply to the things I'm learning, to self-regulate, to demonstrate task initiation, task completion. It's this working memory capacity. So the analogy Josh is referring to is I just speak to that with calories. But that's the interesting part around this work and what we look at, and we'll dive into in the next few episodes, the environment. Is there anything in my environment? And this is the EF glasses that people put on, and I mentioned this, the visual environment, right? The acoustic environment, the physical environment, the stuff in the room. Is there anything there that's inhibiting? Interference? Is there anything that I have to navigate? Like, we know, for example, the research has shown us that visual scanning is really taxing on working memory capacity. So if I'm trying to spell and I don't know my letters, like, there's little adjustments that can be made at any grade level to offload some of that working memory capacity. For my students, I tell the story in the first book, like, here I am as a science teacher in 9th grade, and the majority of my students are multi-language learners, and I'm relying on verbal communication far too much, and sometimes entirely. And that's an equity issue, because if you're translating everything I'm saying and everything you're reading, and the person right next to you, primary language is English, right? No working memory capacity, right? And I used to, up until last Friday, when someone finally did this to me. I'm going to say this to you real quick. I want you to do this math problem in your head and say the answer, okay? What's 6 times 7? What's 6 times 7?
42.
I'm asking you three.
Sorry, 42.
42.
Do you all get that? Okay. I've always used this and that, this, and then someone was in the background going like this, and I was like, oh no. They all started saying 6, 7, 6, 7, that whole thing my daughters talk about. I still don't understand what that is. So now I use I'm going to change my math. Point being, if you went, 42, no working memory. But if you're like my 6th grade daughter and she's going 6, 12, 18, 20, like, she's using some of that bandwidth, right? The more we can get to 42, right? And so then we look at, like, what's the prior knowledge needed to do this thing we're doing? If I make assumptions about that prior knowledge without knowing that you know it, then this probably isn't going to go well for all the kids in the room. And that's the intentionality and the lenses. Like, you're looking at your routines, you're looking at your instruction, you're looking at the environment in ways really to reduce extraneous cognitive load and free up working memory, which manifests in these behaviors. And what we want to see, not compliance, TJ, but these on-task, engaged, curious behaviors. And if I'm in that low level or heightened level of fight or flight, then it's less likely, because that capacity is taxed. And we got to keep in mind that we may not know what that kid's experiencing outside of school. So it's really important that we shape these artificial environments, our classrooms, the school, in ways that lead to better executive functioning, because they might be navigating chaos and trauma and trying to show up and do a good job in school. So
well, I really hope that teachers who are listening, principals who are listening, we call them environmentalists, the people who create these environments, district leaders, I really hope they're geeking out on this, and they're going to go buy both books and learn more about it and learn from this 4-part series. And I'll tell you why. Because I think that this might be a fundamental, I talk about structural issues that need to change in school for real learning to take place. And I really think you've cracked the code on one of the fundamental problems that we're not attending to. Mitch, I think all of us have, some of that in our work, whether it's social and emotional or student behaviors with Josh's work, social and emotional for Kim, school culture and principal capacity in my case. But the structural problem that you're getting at is the inability to do rigorous coursework and to be creative. Without an automatic process and a predictable routine, students don't have the ability to think creatively. That's just how our brains are wired. The research on that is clear, that we have to have the prior knowledge to do something well before we're going to take a risk with it. And I think when students are taxed by the environment and all of the things that are eating up those calories, so to speak, their mental capacity, it's no wonder they can't answer rigorous questions or do really higher order work or be creative. And those are the things that everybody wants. So all of our listeners are going to say, yes, we want a rigorous environment for students. Yes, we want our students to learn to be creative. Well, what I'm saying is that's not going to happen if students are dysregulated or if the environment is not set up so that they can be successful.
Right.
I hope I'm being clear about that, because
you are very clear.
It worries me that we want something and then we blame the system or we blame the kid for not being able to produce when it's not. That's not the problem.
Or we blame the previous year. What's going on in elementary? They show up in middle school, and so much of that we'll talk about is developmental, like it's age appropriate. But it is where, then we'll end on this, Josh, because I know we're probably at time.
We're getting close.
What we do as educators is intentionally craft artificial environments. Natural environments have not evolved for efficient and effective learning. The rule in nature, think about it, is survival of the fittest. And we have this collective wisdom in our species, for example. Like, how did we figure out not to eat that plant? That's
someone died.
Somebody died. Like, our collective wisdom is there's corpses along the way, right? As our species. We would never subject, or at least I hope that's not what we're subjecting kids to. We want it to be fair. We want it to be efficient. We want it to be, effective. And so we intentionally craft artificial environments that lead to better executive functioning. And a kind of bigger umbrella is they feel safer. We want kids to feel safe. Nobody is going to take risks inherent to learning unless they feel safe, regardless of what they're navigating outside of school. And inherent to learning anything new is failure. It's part of the process. So if I don't feel safe, I'm less likely to take those risks. And when we approach the environment in this way through the executive functioning lens, it crafts those spaces. And then in the meantime, like as a byproduct, we're supporting the development of these executive functions.
Mitchell, you'll enjoy this. As a 6th grader, I had an organization class. I got a D in it. Yeah.
Yes. You passed. That
was always my goal. I always pass. And at one point I told my mom D's get degrees. She didn't really enjoy that comment, but
yeah, it doesn't work too well in K-12, but yeah, at college it works.
No. All right. So just as a reminder, we're going to do this as a 4-part series today. It's more of an intro, why it's important, gave you some examples, but we're going to go into core executive functioning as the next episode, then high order executive functioning, and then college and career in regards to the same topic with EF. So super excited about the series. I think this is really important to TJ's point as to why we need to have this conversation. Before we close this down though, Kim, I always like throwing it to you because I want folks to head over to your website for the VIBE Edu event that's happening July 31st and August 1st. So is there any updates that you want to provide for our listeners?
Well, I have kind of been teasing out a little bit the idea that we do have the VIBE Edu Inclusion Impact Fellowship. And so we have partnered with two incredible foundations, the California Foundation for Stronger Communities, and then also the Down Syndrome Foundation in Orange County. And they want to pour money into educators and into good coaching. And so if you are a California teacher and you are interested in, yes, coming to VIBE Edu on July 31st and August 1st, and also getting intentional coaching for 3 months, and also being able to go and fly and see a bison classroom, an intentional classroom in action filled with social emotional learning, executive functioning skills. It's just, it's an experience that you want to be a part of. Well, there's funding now for that. And so applications are now open. If you go to, teachinginsideout.com, we actually have a tab called The Fellowship. And if you click that, you can read all about it. And application is down at the bottom. Get them in before we close soon, because we already have teachers who have filled it out. So interviews are going to happen soon, and we have 6 spots available for this first cycle. But don't worry, it'll get bigger, it'll get better. Just because you're not in California, just wait. Like, your time is coming.
So for information in regards to the fellowship, is it that same website that I posted?
Teaching Inside Out. And then they just click on the fellowship. It's also down at the bottom on where you could put down there too, for VIBE Edu. The application is down at the bottom of the page. Yeah, we're good.
Awesome. Okay. Well, super exciting announcement that Kim was going to tease out. I didn't realize you were going to throw that out there. So that's very cool that folks get to know about what we've been working on for several months, but super excited about the event. We're going to try and give a little bit of information with each episode and just kind of update you on such an impactful event. It was such a cool thing to be a part of last year. Now we get the presence of the wonderful and amazing TJ Vari. So super excited for this year. It's going to be amplified even more. And we got the second day, which we didn't have last year. So those are the VIP tickets. So you can find information. I'll make sure that that link is in the show notes for everyone. I'll also have for our I know Mitch had to go. But for Mitch's book, we're going to have a link in the show notes also, so you can grab his second resource now that it's live and out in the world. So we want to celebrate Mitch in regards to that resource. So make sure you're picking that up. And then, of course, all of our websites will be in the show notes for you. So if you need anything, any support in any of the topics that TJ had mentioned before, we're here for you. And we're looking forward to this brand new series on executive functioning. And we'll see you again next week.